So very recently, the UFC signed Nursulton Ruziboev to the UFC to fight Brano Ferreira on short notice, and it got me thinking about more fighters that Uzbekistan could have in the UFC, more fighters that the UFC could sign that are from Uzbekistan, and I think it would make sense for the UFC to sign more fighters from Uzbekistan because it seems like they're very, very popular. Muradov is already in the UFC and he's got 2 million followers. Nursulton Ruziboev just got signed to the UFC. This guy's got 1.3 million followers on Instagram as well. These guys are popular, and it seems like Uzbekistan are very big fans of MMA and will do a lot to support their fighters, like follow them on Instagram to the point where they've got millions of followers. It's absolutely insane. Ruziboev coming into the UFC with 1.3 million followers is crazy. And I think there's a lot more fighters that I think could potentially be signed to the UFC from Uzbekistan. So that's what this video is about. It's about the best fighters from Uzbekistan that are ready to be signed to the UFC right now. I've got 10 more fighters on the list, and one of them is Nursulton Ruziboev. And I believe Nursulton is actually the brother of Nursulton Ruziboev. I'm not entirely sure, but I did see that he posted about Nursulton getting signed to the UFC. They've both got the same surname. I mean, they were both born in Uzbekistan as well, but Nursulton is also very popular. This guy's got 120,000 followers on Instagram himself, so he's obviously a still very popular fighter from Uzbekistan. He's got a fantastic record of 17-4 as a lightweight. He hasn't really been beating the best competition recently, but he has been beating them quite dominantly. A lot of first-round finishes, a lot of finishes in there. He does actually fight very similar to Nursulton Ruziboev, so I wouldn't be too surprised if they were brothers or related in some way. But I think he probably is the best prospect right now from Uzbekistan that the UFC could just sign straight up. The next one is Bogdan Guskov. Now, Bogdan Guskov is 14-2, and most importantly, he's a light heavyweight. And the UFC needs more light heavyweights. The UFC's light heavyweight division is pretty shallow, and I think Bogdan Guskov would be a fantastic signing for them to pick up. He did win very recently with a 25-second knockout, and before that he knocked someone out in 30 seconds. This guy is finishing everybody he fights in the first round as of recent. I think he would be a very smart signing. He hasn't lost since 2020. He's gone undefeated in about 3 years now. He's only 30 years old. The UFC needs more light heavyweights. Bogdan Guskov seems to be one of the best light heavyweights from Uzbekistan out there. And not even that, probably the best unsigned light heavyweight in the world. Maybe aside from the few like Diego Lopez and just sort of other fantastic fighters. But I think Bogdan Guskov would be a very smart signing by the UFC to make. The next one is Azamat Neftaliev, another one that makes sense because he's a heavyweight and the UFC needs heavyweights. The UFC has a very shallow heavyweight division as well. They've only got about 35 to 40 fighters from the heavyweight division on their roster, and I think another heavyweight would make sense, and you could just get another heavyweight from Uzbekistan. I mean, it just makes all the sense in the world to me. I think he would be a good signing. He's 14-1, got a fantastic record. His one loss was to Slim Trabelsi, and we all know Slim Trabelsi is a fantastic prospect, but unfortunately he's going through like a lot of management issues right now, so I don't really know what's up with him, but the point is, he's bounced back from that loss. He's won 2 fights in a row, 14-1 record at heavyweight, and he's from Uzbekistan. Would be a perfect signing for the UFC. Absolutely perfect. Another very good signing for the UFC to make if they were to sign Razamonbek Temirov. I'm so sorry I didn't say his name correctly. This would be another fantastic signing for the UFC. He's a flyweight, but on top of that as well, he does train with Muradov as well, and Muradov, as I said, has literally got 2 million followers on Instagram. A lot of finishes. The one little issue is he is signed to Ryzen, so he potentially has an exclusive contract to Ryzen, so we might just have to wait for that to kind of go away. Maybe they were a little bit too late on the signing, but to be fair, I also didn't realize who this guy was until I made this video, and I probably should have noticed him a long time ago. He's got a fantastic record, 16-2 as a flyweight, fantastic fighter. I really would like to see this guy in the UFC if possible. The next one is Bahramjon Mushrapov. He is 22 years old. He's 7-2. Maybe he's a guy that you've got to give a little bit more time to because he is literally only 22 years old. However, he's coming off a pretty important win earlier this year against Logan Urban. And if you recognize that name, Logan Urban was on Dana White's Contender Series, and for, I believe it was the guy that popped under USADA twice, Josh Quinlan. Josh Quinlan beat him. He was on the Source, and then Josh Quinlan went to make his UFC debut. Couldn't happen because he was on the Source still. Anyway, he beat the guy that was on Dana White's Contender Series. So he beats a guy that is at least at Dana White's Contender Series level, right? And that's an LFA. And a lot of the time, when fighters from around the world come over to the USA, to fight on an LFA card or to fight for Cage Fury FC, it's because they want the UFC to notice them. They want to fight in the USA to get the attention of the UFC, and that's exactly what Musharraf would have done, I would assume. So he is probably a guy, only 22 years old, probably a guy you would put on Dana White's Contender Series, but with that being said, I think he is definitely a good prospect. Another good prospect is Anvar Abdullayev. He's a flyweight. He's 6-0. I mean, he's literally undefeated. Great record. Maybe he's another guy you need to give a little bit more time, but he's also undefeated. He's finished most of his opponents. He's beaten good opponents as well. You know, he beat a guy that was 3-1 when he was 3-0, and then he beat a guy that was 6-1 when he was 4-0. So he is getting past some pretty good levels of competition. I think Anvar Abdullayev is a pretty good signing for the UFC, or maybe a Dana White's Contender Series guy to test out before we put him on the big show. Another one is Dostan Bozarov. Now, Dostan Bozarov, unfortunately, hasn't really fought the best levels of competition throughout his career, but he does have a win over a 4-0 opponent, a 7-2 opponent, and recently a 4-2 opponent who fought him on short notice. I think that he's probably a good signing. You know, he's on an 8-fight win streak right now. He seems to be a young guy. I don't know how old he is, but he hasn't really been in the game for too long. He only turned pro in 2020, so maybe you put him on Dana White's Contender Series, give him an opportunity there, and if he wins, you can hit him up, maybe sign him then. The next one is Eldor Iranov. Now, Eldor Iranov, I believe he actually fights for Makhmud Muradov's promotion. He does, but once again, unfortunately, this guy just has not really fought the best levels of competition, so we don't really know how good he is. Maybe he's a guy that needs a Dana White's Contender Series fight, or you just give them a little bit more time to beat a couple more people, and also just to kind of get some good wins under his belt, because we just haven't really seen him beat the best competition. Most of his wins are guys that are making their debut or people with losing records, so still a good prospect to keep your eye on, but maybe just give him a little bit more time. And then the next one is Jahangir Jumayev. He is 10-3. He's 30 years old. 8 of his wins are by KO. 2 of them are by submission. You know what that means. It means he's a fun fighter to watch. And not only that, he has fought some really good competition. You know, he lost to Dylan Salvador. Dylan Salvador is actually on Dana White's Contender Series coming up very, very soon this year. And on top of that as well, before that, he beat a guy that was 7-0 and submitted him in the first round. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential from Jahangir Jumayev. Maybe you give Jahangir Jumayev a Dana White's Contender Series opponent now. Maybe he's ready for that. Who knows? But I think he's also a good opportunity to sign. And Imran Israilov is only 24 years old, but he's already got 11 pro fights. He's 9-2. He does have a couple of losses, but they are to guys that maybe it was just a little bit too much too soon. But it was a couple of years ago. But because he kind of wasn't able to got by the guys, which I just said potentially were too much too soon, maybe you have to give him a little bit more time as well, because he wasn't able to pass the test of a 9-3 and 20-11 opponent. So I think maybe he's a guy that needs a little bit more time, but he's only 24 years old. Maybe give him a year or two. Dana White's Contender Series, maybe to sign him straight up. You never know. Maybe in a year's time he's like 12-2 and he's just won 3 in a row. Who knows? But I think he's also a good prospect. Let me know what you think of this list, and let me know if there's anyone I missed. I feel like there's probably a lot of fans in Uzbekistan who probably know a lot more than me about the best prospects from Uzbekistan, because if you guys don't know, the reason why I actually found out who Nursulton Ruziboev is before he popped up on my radar when he was signed to the UFC was because someone in my comments literally tagged him in my comment section on Instagram. So I found out who he was that way. So maybe there's other people that know a lot more than me. Maybe there's more fighters that I missed. I'm going to be doing more videos like this, so please do subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you guys in the next video.